Hi, good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to the another higher education leaders series webinar that we are posting at the Outreach Collective. My name is Ankur Vora. I am the co-founder of the Outreach Collective, along with Bhakti Shah, who is my co-founder for the collective. Over the last 9 months, we have had many distinguished speakers come on the forum, speak to us. We started with Professor Dr. C. Rajkumar, the founding vice chancellor at Jindal, and then we have seen a very unique list of individual contributors, team players who have reshaped the way the higher education is perceived in this country, and in a way impacted the conversations that are happening around career counseling, career guidance, admissions, outreach, edtech companies. And today I have the honor of introducing Mr. Maheshwar Peri, who needs no introduction. I mean, the moment I put in this email and WhatsApp that he will be coming and speaking to the community. I mean, we all know the excitement that he brings to all of us. He's a distinguished leader of higher education. He has been instrumental in setting up, very interesting projects. I mean, starting from his career as an investment banker, then moving on to, he is, by the way, a qualified CA and a CS. I mean, doing CA in itself is a big thing, but doing CA, CS shows you the tenacity that he has. He came from a humble background, from a village in Andhra, and his story that I shared last night on the WhatsApp group is an inspiring tale of how, in spite of all the adversities, if you have in it you uh, to make it big. I mean, there are times when God, universe helps you, and I think Mahesh will talk about more of it about his journey when he comes on board. But from CACS to in an investment banker in SBI to launching, being a key part of the launch of the Outlook magazine, and then subsequently moving on to the launch of Careers 360. And we all know Careers 360 today, and we all know Mahesh as an entrepreneur. But what I read over the last couple of days when I was reading his bio was the word that he used. Career counselor, and I never associated career counselor with Mahesh. And when I read that word, I really understood a bit of the person behind the Maheshwar Peri we know. I mean, this is also a fanboy moment for me. I remember 2016, I was working with Ashoka University. I was going to Singapore. We were in the same flight, and Maheshwar was sitting, I think, 4 seats in front of me, and I was like what, 8 years back, I was spellbound. I said, "This guy is the guy who is, runs Careers 360, and I should connect with him." I never knew his bio in detail, but just connected with him for 2 minutes at Changi Airport, and I said, "This is, hey, I love what you're doing with Careers 360." And Mahesh was in a hurry; he was rushing out of the airport. But from that day onwards, I made a connect with this guy, and I said, I don't know what it is, but I really respected him that day. And now, 8 years later, to have him at the TOC forum and speaking highly about what we are doing at the Outreach Collective is truly a fanboy moment for me, and I'm sure for Bhakti as also. We are both excited. Somebody was telling me, you look so fresh, and I am coming back from 4 meetings in the day. I just rushed back from Delhi to Faridabad, where I stay, after 4 meetings, and I'm looking refreshed. I said it's the adrenaline rush of having
No, you
Maheshwar.
also don't wear a Nehru jacket for every session. This is special.
So I didn't remove my Nehru jacket today because I really, this guy demands respect, and I've been following, and all of us have been following what he writes on Twitter and social media, and we really relate to him because we feel that he speaks from the heart, and he speaks on issues that nobody else is talking about, and maybe I don't know, the reasons are many for people not speaking out, but yeah, that's my introduction for Maheshwar. Maheshwar, we are so happy to have you here with us. And looking forward to the session. I present to you the community, the Outreach Collective, which is one of the fastest growing admissions outreach and career counseling community in the country. I mean, all of us came together and said something has to give, and there has to be better conversations about how do we enable our students to make better career choices? How do we enable them to have more choices than the few private universities that we keep talking about, or international destinations that we keep sending those students to? And all of these members that we have at the collective right now, we have almost about 250 paid members that have taken the membership of the Outreach Collective, and every week they're doing something very interesting. And so I'm so proud of each of us in the TOC to have that passion and commitment to making career counseling as a field that it should be. So I will stop speaking now. I think I have had a long introduction. But Maheshwar, over to you. We'd love to start by, hearing you out some personal reflections. I touched upon your personal story of coming from Andhra, doing CA and CS, and from those humble backgrounds to making it big. So please, over to you for your reflections on TOC. You said good things about us. What have you been hearing? We'd love to hear more about TOC from you. And then subsequently over to you for your journey in probably 5 to 10 minutes that you would like to do that.
So I don't know what kind of WhatsApp message that you forwarded, first of all, Ankur. So I wouldn't comment on that because it can be good, bad, or ugly. Right? Can you hear me, Ankur?
Yeah, perfectly
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know what kind of WhatsApp message you forwarded, but see, for me, now any collective, any group of people who are trying to, get together to solve the counseling issues is welcome, right? Anyone, right? Because I think a lot more information exchange needs to be done at a counselor level. No counselor is complete. No counselor is adequately informed. All counselors put together would be decently informed, right? So for me, a group, a collective like yourself, where you're exchanging notes, learning from each other, talking of new things that are coming up in the market, because every single day something is becoming dated and something new is coming up, right? Something is becoming obsolete, something is exciting is coming up, right? So from that perspective, I think the Outreach Collective, when I heard that you guys are started that and it's really scaling up is what I understand from the market. I think it's a very, very welcome step. Two, I think when a group of people get together, my experience has been that they become more ethically and morally answerable, right? Because you need to face up to each other every single day. You need to respond to each other, and that will normally happen when you're very upright and straight. So whenever an association forms, I'm always happy because people become more responsible, people become more accountable, people become more answerable, and to that extent, even if some people are doing things not the right way, they start correcting themselves. It might be slight, but it will increase as you move along. So that also that's been my experience with forming associations. I've been the president of Association of Indian Magazines, IEC. I was the founding member, and so on and so forth. So it normally happens that once an association is formed, people become more responsible, and that is very, very welcome. So one, you exchange information. So I think the Outreach Collective members would be better informed than if you're outside the collective. Two, you become more responsible. So to that extent, you're more ethically more on the straighter path than people who are outside the system. And both these things are very important for me. So from that perspective, I genuinely welcome the Outreach Collective and the way you're going about doing it. In fact, we ourselves are trying to work on something to, work in this space. I'll maybe speak to you offline once it's over, right? As far as I am concerned, I've come from a public education system. I know what affordability means. I know what affordable education would mean to a lot of students. I have always lived amongst people or studied along with people who couldn't have paid the fee if it was as high as what it is today. I know a lot of people who are my friends right now sitting in Delhi, or entrepreneurs, or even IAS officers and all, who have benefited out of public education system. I actually loathe the fact that a lot of people who benefited out of public education system are now decimating public education system because they think there is a gain on the other side. So for me, if India really needs to deal with its demographic dividend, because see, you don't gain demographic dividend just because you're a most populous nation. It doesn't happen automatically. You need to invest in your people to become, gain the dividend. There is nothing in the world where you accrue dividend without investment. And the investment cannot be people. The investment has to be investing in those people who, which is a resource for you, right? So if India has to really move ahead, then and actually gain the demographic dividend that it thinks it has a right on, then we need to invest in our people. The government may not have all the resources, in which case the private people like yourself and myself have to step forward. And that's very crucial for us. Otherwise, you will actually get into a demographic nightmare situation, because just imagine a bunch of people, crores of people who are not gainfully employed out there on the streets, right? And that's a dangerous situation that you as a country can get yourself into. So from that perspective, I think that one of the reasons why I'm into education is because I think there is a lot to contribute in this space in terms of policy making, in terms of pushing governments and companies and private citizens to invest more in education, more in its people, rather, more than, education is a very narrow term. Invest more in people so that they become more productive and can gainfully contribute to the nation and to themselves also. So that's where I stand. And so much of the conversations that I drive or initiate as debates, conversations and all are, I know very well that, I'll have a lot of hate coming my way, but someone needs to put that thing into the system to let that conversation come. And whatever comes out of it, I'm not out here to impose my thoughts on people, but I'm definitely into, injecting certain conversations amongst people so that is another perspective also is discussed, debated, and then whatever you guys decide. I'm not the lawmaker, right? So I still need to comply with the law, whatever it is. So tomorrow, if the government of India says that you need to impose GST on students who are staying in hostels, which is what has happened, you need to comply with the law, but keep fighting that law, right? Because you can't expect a student to not stay in a hostel while studying in the college, but that's what has happened now, right? So these are issues that need to be discussed, debated, confronted, fought, while still being compliant with the law. So that's where I end, and over to you guys.
Absolutely. And I think I get that. I was reading somewhere, I mean, you cannot be a leader without unsettling a few people. I mean, that's what I read somewhere. And I think that's so right. I mean, you have to, not everybody will like what you have to say, because there are vested interest in anything that we do in this world. I mean, and if you go against the norm, there are people that will take offense. But I think for you, what we really like, I mean, especially I'm talking about the collective. I mean, we feel that there is a voice that is especially talking about issues that nobody else is raising. And I think you are pointing in that direction, that nobody else is talking about that. Somebody has to do it. And it's Maheshwar that is doing that for us. And I'll come to that and how you have, over the years worked in that direction. But I still want to, spend a few minutes with you from your journey from Andhra to, I mean, I read you the unfortunate demise of your father, the early demise of your father, and you had an opportunity to go for a government job that was being given to you, but you didn't take that government job and you went your own way. So what was going through your mind at that point of time? Because why did you not take up that government job and you said, no, this is not what I want to do? If you could just shed a bit light on that, I think that our members will also get a perspective on the man behind and the story that you have there.
Well, I don't know where I wrote this because it's a very personal story, honestly. But I think
it's in the Live Mint article on you.
Okay.
And I shared that in the WhatsApp group. You mentioned what did you share? I started your journey from there.
Right. So the thing is this, see, for like my father passed away when I was just finishing my graduation. I was all of 17, 18 then. By the way, you can't have an 80-year-old boy, passing out graduation these days, but those days it was possible because I jumped 4th to 6th and 8th to 10th, then those kind of things happened. Right. उस जमाने में double promotion रहता था, अभी नहीं है शायद, मुझे पता नहीं है, right? The thing is, there is always a fate that is written on all our faces, but still we need to drive ourselves to certain things. So when a father passed away, and that's where the counseling helps, Ankur. It's extremely important for you to deal with counseling from that perspective. That family was strained because father was going through a problem for 3-4 years before he passed away. And once he passed away, there was a government job waiting for you, and everyone, relatives and everyone would come and say, listen, abhi to sarkari naukri mil gayi, kind of a thing. Because in that kind of India, from where I come in, government job is a big thing. It's a big achievement. Everyone works for that. But my mother has confidence in me. This guy really studies well, so he should not ideally jump onto a job at that point in time. And a counselor, I would call him a counselor, though he was actually a relative for me, who says, listen, Mahesh, you don't need to worry. This government job, you can exercise over 3 years period. So that was the first advice they gave. So I had 3 years to exercise that option. Right. That's the first thing. The second thing is you must do CA because there is no fee and you actually get a stipend in return. Now, both these are counseling advices for me. Now, if that person did not advise that, I didn't have money to study, so I would not go for further higher education. And two, I would have exercised the option that was there on the table, which is a government job, which is what everyone studies to get into. Right. So for me, counseling is, giving a new direction to a child, which will change the perspective and change the future. Today, if I had exercised those options, I would be, in a government job, and they do a fantastic service. I'm not belittling anything that's happening, but this path would not have been possible for me. So one of the reasons why I set up Career 60 is also essentially that you can intervene in different phases of a student's life to give a direction that will change the way the child looks at life. All of us have that opportunity. Like, I keep thinking of the person who told me this when the family was discussing what next for Mahesh. Right now, that man knew the inside details that a child can exercise the option within 3 years, and there is a CA where there is no fee, and actually you get money in return, which is a stipend. So for me, counseling comes from that perspective, that all of us have if we are better informed, which this person was, he did his research and came back, we actually have the ability to change a student's life, and that's important.
Absolutely. And I think having the right intent of guiding neutrally and not being biased to a particular institution and get into that is very, very important to be a counselor. I think that's the foundation of any counselor to be. But Bhakti has some interesting questions that she has for you. And Bhakti, over to you.
Thanks, Ankur. First of all, Mahesh, thanks for revisiting a very personal story with us here. As someone who lost my father very early, I completely resonate with the importance of guidance at a tender age when you lose a parent, especially a father. I'm not, again, I want to be politically correct. Doesn't mean losing a mother is any less painful, but you know what I mean. Do you think did your interest towards guidance and that spark in you of making a difference and impact? I won't even call it guidance. I don't think you're a career counselor from the perspective of college admissions. I think you're someone who's more like a coach, a mentor, someone who guides, right? So is that sense of wanting to guide people around you, and especially young students, is it where that started? And is that the reason you transitioned from investment banking to publishing to setting up Careers 360? Tell us a little bit about how that spark became the fire that we know as Careers 360.
So, see, as I said, my father was unwell for 3, 4, 5 years. So one of the things is I studied in a government college, because government college has very little fee. Right. I studied in a government degree college where it was residential, so the fee was almost again next to zero. Right. See, in all these journeys now, that's where I talk to institutions about diversity. All these institutions which charge 10 lakh rupees, 8 lakh rupees, when you don't create diversity, economic and social diversity, then you're making the students learn in a ghetto. It's a ghetto. You have a similar bunch of people who can afford to pay 10 lakh rupees, who exactly talk the same problems. For them, the biggest problem that they have to solve is how can we free this, traffic on a flyover. For them, they can't think of anything. They've not seen the worldly problems that the world faces, or a lot of people around the world face, right? Like I went to a particular B school about a decade back. I was teaching them entrepreneurship, and they said, I said, okay, what are the problems you want to solve? Someone was saying, sir, traffic is a problem, so flyover badana hai. And someone said, sir, telecom is, zyada telecom tower chahiye because, connectivity is a problem. So for them, those are the biggest problems. They've not seen the world. And that's what happens when you create a ghetto. So in the colleges that I studied, people will not go back to their homes if it's a 1 week holiday, because for them, wo aane jaane ka kharcha, it doesn't fit in for them, right? And right now, they're IAS officers sitting in Delhi, right? The fire in the belly is extremely important. And when you go through those kind of journeys, you ensure that you don't leave the hand of people who are likely to have similar journeys. I studied in a college where people can't pay their 14 rupee fee. I studied in a college where I got merit scholarship of 1,000 rupees, and that was the most important thing because that ensured that I could buy my books and everything. And a lot of people would do that, which is merit scholarships. So it can be merit scholarship or need-based scholarship or economically backward scholarships or anything. Affordability is something, importance of money is something. So today I value every single rupee because I've seen people who can change their lives with the 1,000 rupees that I would spend in a 5-star hotel, right? And education must come from that perspective. If you need to understand and empathize with the lowest set of people and then deal with that. So that's the first part of it. The second part of it is when you talk of counseling, how does counseling come to you? Increasingly, when you study in these kind of places, they're all struggling to understand what next and what next. And the what next typically nowadays was, if you're a PCM student, you get into IITs or prepare for JEE. If you're a PCB student, you get into medical college or IAS officer and those kind of things. Those are the obvious paths. But I'm not the topmost student. At some point in time, I was an average student. At a school level, I was an average student. Counseling must deal with not whether I am Ahmedabad or Bangalore or Calcutta is better, but about if you're a 70 percentile student, which is a good B school for you, because everyone deserves a chance. All of us at some point in time were average students. We were not the toppers in the class every single time. And when I look around entrepreneurship around me, I can promise you that not one of them was a topper, right? But they were succeeded in life. They succeeded in life because they had greater fire in the belly. They had greater enterprise, greater innovation, and those kind of things, right? So for me, career counseling is about handholding those children who are normally denied or who cannot crack the plan A, which is getting into IIM, IITs, IAS, and so on and so forth. But catching hold of those people who desperately need you, because by then the society has shunned them, saying, "Acha, aapko mila nahi IIM mein, abhi kya karoge bete? Acha, IIT mein mila nahi, abhi kya karoge bete?" No, that is where the journey starts for them, right? And for me, if you look at Career 360, we don't really dwell on talking to students who got 99 percentile and above. We talk to students who got 70 percentile and say, okay, these are the 10 options that you have. So the information that we create, the data that we collect, the data that we collate is all about how do we lead an average student to still a bright future, because everyone deserves a bright future. For me, the journey started there when I said that, the options are limited for people who are not the toppers, and handhold them to a brighter future.
I think we can so relate to it, and you're absolutely correct. We were not all the toppers every time around. And my own story, I mean, I was a 70% kind of a student and never being amongst the top 10. I mean, all of us were not the priority for the school. And it starts from the schools where you have a separate section for the toppers and they will get all the extra attention. And then all the other 3 sections will be like, "Arey, inka kuch nahi ho sakta, inko side mein rakho." They can just pass through the CBSE exams and they are not the ones that are going to crack the IITs. And then the options for even the students who do not crack the IITs, are next to nothing. I mean, you
Absolutely.
see the, I mean, if I am a average student in India, I get 70, 80%. Even today, if I get 85%, if I don't get into IIT or a Delhi University, or for that matter, any good public institution, I have to go to a private institution, which is doing a very, to be honest, a substandard job of dishing out education,
Absolutely.
where in the name of education is just credentialing, giving you a paper and saying, this is it. And then we say, industry academia divide, our graduates are not ready, the demographic dividend. And I keep seeing editorials after editorials being written on this, but nothing moving on the ground. So, I mean, that is why we relate to you so much. I mean, that is the honest, we have faced it. We are that generation. 20 years back, when I graduated from college, I'm being very honest. I went through 4 years of my college life without it actually gaining anything substantial. It was just passing through the semesters, getting the routing, memorizing the exam, routing, and then getting the certificate and moving out. Actual learning started when I came outside of university and actually went to the real world. So that silo is so suffocating for our kids. And I think you have touched upon the right notes, Mahesh. And I would really want also to talk about something that I read in your bio and your journey as a professional. And again, going back to the two articles that you have on your LinkedIn page, the Live Mint one and the Scroll one. And the Live Mint one, I think one of the turning point for you, this is my assumption after reading that, was the battle with IIPM. And before IIPM, the start of the B school rankings in this country. And when I was reading that, and it really came as how did Outlook look at or Business Today, which came out with the first set of rankings, and then they saw a huge opportunity in terms of revenue and all that, and then IIPM came in, and the whole story. We'd love to hear and understand more about. That's the obvious question. I have a couple of questions from the community also. We have Adarsh. I don't know if he's here, Adarsh Khandelwal, who is the founder of Collegify. Adarsh had sent in his questions to me. He said, Mahesh, going against odds at IIPM and standing up and fighting for the right, what drives you? And also the edtech sector still has a lot of scams and fake commitments, advertisements, data selling. How do you think we can curtail that? I mean, it's a couple of questions put together by Adarsh, but I think we can address the first question that he had for you, the IIPM saga.
So I think it's not just about IIPM. I think there are many IIPMs around. So it's not just about one institution. I think he was a fool that he tried to fight it out when he was living in a glass dome, and that's where he got messed up, right? But there are many IIPMs around. The thing is, for us, when we create information, when we create data, when we create content and all, the primary thing is for us, the student. So whatever is in the interest of the student, we'll actually work towards it. And we will not do anything that is likely to mislead a student. So that's the first principle, which means, are we having data about some college which is wrong for the colleges? It's possible, right? The thing about IIPM was that while there were a lot of B schools around at that point in time, he was the biggest crook of the lot. And Outlook did a ranking, and somewhere, they published that he was the fourth best or something in international accreditation or some such nonsense. And so it happened. And what happened was, that day I walked into the office and I saw his child and a parent waiting. And the parent wanted to meet me, it seems. I was at Outlook then. And so when I went to my office, my secretary told me that, listen, there is a parent who wants to meet me. And typically I meet all parents who come to meet me. I don't avoid when a parent wants to meet, right? And the parent comes and says, sir, हमारा बच्चा आपके IIP में पढ़ा था, आपने 100% placement बोला है, पर 100% तो नहीं है, sir, guaranteed, because मेरा बच्चा place नहीं हुआ है. That's a simple thing. So it can be 99.9%, but not 100% for sure. So I called up for the data, saying, because see, I'm committed to the truth, whatever it is, right? I called up for the data from Arindam, and Arindam said, I don't give. I said, if you don't give, I'm going to remove you from the ranking, because this is what has happened to me, right? And he said, no, aapki marzi hai and all. I removed the ranking. For me, the matter was over then and there. See, my idea is not to keep fighting to the end. अगर सच मैं झूठ बोला हूँ तो वापस I'll correct myself by telling the truth. When I created Career 360, by then and at Outlook, what used to happen is when we do cover stories, the biggest selling stories would be when we do a cover story on health or religion or education. But typically news media covers politics, business, and celebrities because that gives them a lot of power. The sense of power is what they get when journalists get when they cover a politician, a businessman, or a celebrity. But the sales would happen here because that's the need of the people. And it was very clear that after Outlook, I'll start something of my own. I don't understand religion. I don't understand health as much as I could create a publication out of it, but I do understand education. So that's where I came into creating education thing, right? And by then I decided that when I create education, I'll ensure that I'll force institutions to be transparent. I'm using the word force. So they don't have an option but to be, truthful to the student, because that's where India was lacking. Much of the coverage of education in the mainstream media was confined to the handouts of pamphlets or press releases given by the institutions, because it was never coming from the student side of it. It was always coming like when a media publication publishes that 1 crore package, how did that information leak out? Because the institution gave that press release. When someone said day zero 100%, how did that happen? Because the institution gave the press release or leaked that information. So everything that was being published in the mainstream media was largely handouts from the institutions, and we wanted to turn the tables around and saying, can we do it from the student perspective? So I was very clear that I'll force institutions to be like today, Ankur, we file 20,000 right to information reports every single year. 20,000. दिन में मेरे पास से 100 जाते रहते हैं, मेरे पास 50-100 जाते हैं RTIs के, right? And that's important for me because that's where we exactly understand what's happening on the other side, right? So for me, I was very clear that Career 360 will ensure that what was important and needed by the student, which I found in Outlook, that health, education, and all. In education, I'll create greater transparency so that the student benefits at the end of it. In that process, I was doing a story on the business of B school rankings. A journalist wrote to not just IIPM but about 20 other institutions where we found flaws in their communication or in the advertisements. It is just that IIPM took me to court even before I published the story. And because IIPM took me to the court, I had to get that injunction vacated. So I did more deep down research and found much more than what I initially thought existed. I went to the court and said, this is the proof that I have of the kind of flaws that IIPM has. Should I carry it or no in public interest? When the court saw that, they said, listen, this is ridiculous if you are not allowed to carry this. They vacated the injunction and I was forced to carry the story because I had vacated the injunction. So I carried the story, and the story was called IIPM Best Only in Claims, because till then IIPM was claiming that best better than I am, so best B school or some such nonsense. So I said IIPM Best Only in Claims for the story I carried with. And there, by the way, we did not use any of our opinion. Everything was about, he says he's got a collaboration with this university. We wrote to that university, where they wrote back saying we don't have any such thing. They said we place our students here. We wrote to Infosys and whatever HSBC and all. They said we never had placement from them. So we actually carried our questions, their claims, our questions, and the institution's responses. So there was nothing which was emotional or a rant or an advisor or anything. We just put the facts as they stand by taking their ad, marking out each of the claims and busting them one by one.
Amazing. And then that's why I think eventually you won the battle as well, although you had to spend a lot of money. I read an article about the amount of money that was
so that's
spent,
another thing, Ankur. So I think that's an advice that I will give to all of you. See, not every battle is worth fighting. But there are some battles when you pick them up now, you can't walk away from the turf. Like IIPM was a battle. If I get into it, I should fight it. So when I was doing the story, I was very clear that this will get me into legal trouble. I was absolutely certain, which is where I said I did not carry anything of my own word. It was all about what they claimed, the question from us as a journalist to the other institution or a company or whatever, and their response, because I was very clear of what is about to happen. The thing is, if you get into this, know fully well what you're getting yourself into, because and later IIPM filed the case and they said, okay, you apologize and we'll withdraw the case and all. If I'd apologized, this man would have become a Frankenstein. In which case, it's better not touching that. Let him be, but don't let him vanquish you and become a bigger person than what he is. You get my point? There are many battles that we don't fight because we don't have ability to fight. But when you poke them and apologize to them, then you lose the battle for a million other people. In which case, don't poke them. Now just leave it. There are a lot of things, evils that are happening around you. A lot of people are watching, and you will be one of those people who are watching it. But when you fight them and apologize and submit yourself or crawl, then it's a big, you lost the battle for a million other people who want to be courageous, but suddenly say, isne chhod diya to hum kya cheez hai. So that is not done. So for me, in this entire IIPM battle, I did not file a case against him. He filed 14 cases against me. I only defended myself. And the defense was such that it became offensive for them.
And the 14 cases were all in smaller cities. I mean, Assam
Yeah, that's right.
And all the places, not in Delhi or
that's right,
Mumbai or big cities.
So Delhi also, there are 2-3 cases, civil court, magistrate court, this, that, and all. But in all 14 cases were there. Dehradun ek tha, Chandigarh ek tha, vagara, vagara. But that's where it was.
But you're right. I mean, if you pick your battles very prudently, but if you're in a battle, then you don't give up, because then you lose the battle not only for yourself, but for thousands of others that are looking up to you for take up. So kudos to you for taking that up. And, and I think in the end, you won the case and you were on the right side, because you had all the, as you rightly said, you were countering them on facts. Whatever their claims were, you were asking them for data and facts on those claims, that they were not able to present it. Great. So I think it's also a time for us to get a few of our audience questions coming in. I have a couple of questions that I have had beforehand, but for TOCs that have joined just now.
Just one second, Ankur. It's very related. I have a question, if I can
go first. Go ahead.
It's very related to what Mahesh just said, and I think what Adarsh also just asked, right? So there are many IIPMs, like you said, Mahesh. Not every IIPM can be fought or should be fought or whatever, right? So, but the world of education, higher ed tech is becoming increasingly complex, and it's also very dangerous because there's a direct contact with parents and students where the market is running on FOMO, and B, there's no QC, there's no structure, there's no policies that are governing, for example, career guidance companies or ed tech in career guidance. What do you consider to be the next or the current red alert or red flag in our space at this point, or that you see coming on very, very quickly?
So, Bhakti, I still don't think that informal or skilling or any of those things are a bigger red herring at this, red flag at this point in time. You still need to go back to formal education, because India thrives and survives on, survives and thrives on formal education, right? And what you need to keep going back to is, because students are supposed to be qualified to a certain level. It can be class 10th or 12th or degree or post-graduation and all. So you need to ensure that we basically need to separate this whole thing into legal and illegal, ethical and unethical, moral and immoral, and is it the right way of doing these kind of things, right? We can fight the ethical and unethical battles much later, but first fight the legal and illegal battles first, right? And anything that is illegal can be destroyed and demolished straight away. What is ethical and unethical? Bhakti, see, your ethics and my ethics can be different, because we both draw the line that we draw closer to our chest can be for someone else slightly further away, and for someone else slightly closer, right? Now, ethics is beyond law. So, what is legal and illegal is very clearly defined. If I set up a rule which is 2 steps above what is illegal, what is legal, then it is ethical, right? Because ethics is something that is not covered by law in that sense, right? So for me, I think the first thing that we must cross is to ensure that there is nothing that is illegal that is happening, right? For example, today morning I was checking with a few things, and the data protection bill has an issue, is in conflict with some of the acts that are done by some of the examining bodies. It can be, for example, CLAT. CLAT shares its data with for a lakh of rupees, right? So we need to deal with the legal illegal thing first before we get on to the ethical and unethical, because what is unethical for you might be ethical for me. How do you define that? What is immoral for you might be moral for me. And there we should be very cautious, because we shouldn't be judging each other on those issues. Right. Now, coming to the fear of FOMO, I think the fear of FOMO is largely driven by a system of assessment that we have set in this country, which is standardized assessment, standardized curriculum, standardized testing, and everything is standardized, right? The more interest tests that you have, the more you will make a student a scapegoat. So you need to fight, first of all, whether we need so many entrance tests to begin with, right? If you can deal with it in perspective, then you will anyway be dealing with these things with one swish of a hand. So I'd much rather fight those kind of issues of whether a QET is needed. Today a Delhi student who wants to study anything on undergraduation has to go through an entrance examination. What is the need for a class 12 score then? Why should he study in a school? And every single government student studying in a government school today is disadvantaged, because you can't go through a coaching system. So if you fight those battles, then many other battles will get fought in an automatic course.
Thanks, Mahesh. Ankur, over to you. I know there are so many questions. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I think we can start with Hardik. Go ahead. You have already sent me a message on chat. Please go ahead. I was going to ask you to come on line and ask your question.
My apologies, I am outside somewhere and I just couldn't miss the session. So my question is there on the chat. Ankur or Bhakti, please ask my question.
Okay, let me ask it for you. Let me see. Hardik has asked, what is the role of media in Careers 360? What is the role of media like Careers 360 in shaping up the next very interesting phase of growth for higher education?
Come again, Ankur?
He's asking, what is the role of Careers 360? How do you see Careers 360 helping shape up the narrative around higher education in India? I think you have been very vocal about, I think one of your tweets on IIM's piece went viral and a lot of people screenshotted it and sent it to me on WhatsApp. And they said, this is something that is a very relevant issue. So, I mean, you have always been commenting on higher education and we have heard you for the last 45 minutes as well. How do you see Careers 360 also as an organization helping in this regard and setting the conversation?
It's basically based purely on data, Ankur. See, and everything other than data is an opinion, right? So if I were to buttress a point, I need to use data. For me, the IIM social media thing or whatever the article that we've done wouldn't be possible unless I have data, right? And I was not driving at a conclusion. The data gave me that conclusion, right? And when you look at it, you look at different domains. You look at management, engineering, design, law, medical sciences, and so on and so forth, right? Look at the top 10 fee charging institutions in each of these 5 domains, right? In medical, none of the government institutions are there because they will not be in the top 1,000 fee charging institutions. Law, not in the top 100 because NLU send all 2 lakhs, 1.5 lakh, 2.2 lakhs, whereas the big law institutions charge 3 lakh, 4 lakh. Same thing in design, same thing in engineering. IITs charge 2.25 lakh. The top 20 private institutions, fee charging institutions are all private, right? Then you come to management. In the top 10, 6 are IIMs. It's ridiculous that a public institution charges 27 lakh rupees as fee. It's a crime. Now, the question is, do they need the money? They don't need the money also. Their fee income, their surplus every year is more than the fee income that they charge because they get income from many other sources, right? So for me, public education system is supposed to create a competitive market for quality and affordability, and not compete to create greater surplus. And we've gone wrong somewhere, dramatically wrong somewhere. And for me, I told some of the IIM people also, they're a cabal. They're a cabal which is trying to control in the name of autonomy. And then do what? Create, as someone said, hedge fund managers. So for me, the role of Career 360 is to use data to direct policymakers towards certain things. Like I raised that question. It was later raised in the parliament by a few Rajya Sabha members. And yesterday or day before yesterday, there was an autonomy bill where the powers of the IIMs have been curtailed. So for me, the role of media is this, that can you use data to get to the notice of the policymakers who in turn will act on it at some point in time because they believe in what one is saying and deal with it from that perspective. So you see the bill that the IIM autonomy bill that was presented in the parliament 2 days back, it's essentially what we're talking of, that social equity is a challenge.
Yeah, I read that in the papers that now there is a new bill which is going to bring in some amendments to the 2017 Act.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Act
And I remember long back we wrote a story of how the stipends of fellowships of some of the researchers was not coming in. And then it automatically moved to the next level where the fellowships came in the very next month. So for us, it's about making those small nudges and changes by putting that information out there in the public market space.
Absolutely, absolutely. But then, Mahesh, before I take another question, I want to, I'm also a PhD scholar in higher education, and I do some research in this area. And whenever we talk about the history of higher education institutions in our country, globally also, what we are seeing is, and there is this mention of a World Bank report, which said higher education is a public good or a private good, that debate that goes on. And the World Bank report said that the implications of investing in primary education or school educations, the returns are much more larger than investing in higher education. So actually, this is the argument that is given worldwide. I mean, I have read about US and China and how these governments are silently taking their hands back, pushing their hands back from higher education and saying, I mean, this is something that the private individual should take up. And school education is something that the government should be focusing on, because being a country which is limited in resources, I mean, we can't be giving money across. I mean, this is the unsaid thing that I have undercurrent that I see in the global higher education policy landscape. And where is the money going to come from? I mean, let me give you my example. It's been 20 years since I graduated out of college. I have not seen any new college being set up in my district for last 20 years. And it is still the same college that I had the options to, and I didn't choose them. I went to a private college because I said, who will go to this college? Because I don't think the quality of education that I get will be worth my time. So, I mean, I keep thinking about this. If nobody is investing in higher education, then it's left to private players. And if private players in this country are going to be not for profit, I mean, all of societies are not for profit or any education institution. But a private player would look for a return on investment and would look for, so if the government is pushing their hand back, the vacuum is being filled by private players. And you are absolutely right, the diversity is missing and you have high fee and everything. But what's the solution? And we had the new education policy that talks about our gross enrollment ratio currently is at 26.5% or 27%. In coming few years, we need to double it. And we had Professor Furkan Kamar, who is the ex-Secretary General of AIU on this session. And I asked this question to him. I said, sir, how do you see this GER increasing to 50% in coming decade or so? And he had a very nice point. He said, Ankur, for individuals like you and me, we are already at 100% GER, right? If you want your kid to study in a school, private school, you will make sure he studies. If he goes to college, you will make sure. But what we really want in this country is people from the underprivileged sectors, the farmers, the security guards, the people from blue collar people to be uplifted to a higher education, which is not going to happen unless there is public investment in higher education. But I don't see that happening. So what is your take on this entire circle? What do you think we are going wrong?
I never said that private education should be disincentivized. It must be, it must be incentivized, and there are enough incentives. It is tax-free to begin with. All of us pay 35% tax.
Yeah.
All of us pay on expenditure also about 15% tax, all put together, average. So we're paying half the tax. The education institutions are not paying that tax, right? So to that extent, private education ecosystem is incentivized. The question that we are asking for is, and two, I'm also not for one moment saying that you must create more institutions. All I'm saying is, can you maintain the institutions that have been created? Because the cap cost is done, it's only the operational cost. It's only the operational cost. For a nation which keeps talking of demographic dividend, a nation which keeps talking of its human resource being the biggest resource, how do you not invest in those people and expect everything to be normal? What is the resource of this nation at this point in time? Our brain power? Then invest in them and they will pay back. You invest in an IITian, he'll pay back millions of rupees over his lifetime. You invest in a AIMS doctor, he'll return back crores of rupees over his lifetime. But if you don't invest in them, then you got a problem. Of course, you need to invest more in schools and maybe lesser in higher education. All I'm saying is, don't damn privatize or increase the costs of public education so much that they start competing with private education in terms of the fee structures and not in terms of quality.
Yeah.
Right? Today, Ankur, take the NRF ranking for a moment. NIT Durgapur, NIT Suratkal, NIT Warangal and all, they're nowhere compared to VIT. Go out to an international university and say, and let the two students come, one come from NIT Warangal and one comes from VIT University. See who'll be more respected. Right? The thing is, a student who comes out of public education ecosystem is much more rounded than any student that comes out from a private education ecosystem. The private education ecosystem caters to a certain kind of people, certain class of people. But for a nation to progress, you need to build a public education system which is so competitive on quality and affordability that the private education falls in line in terms of quality and affordability again. You increase this to 25 lakh rupees, like IIMs have increased the fees to 27, 28 lakh rupees. Every B school today is 27, 28 lakh rupees. Or 20 lakh rupees. They're worthless, but the price of MBA has gone up. And that is a crime.
Absolutely. I think what, and there is another angle to this, right, Mahesh, and I'll just quickly point that out. The number of students going abroad from India for higher education is increasing every year. And last year, the number of students going to US to higher education went up by 20%, if I'm not wrong, 20%. And the cost of undergrad and grad education for a year in US, we all know the cost is in lakhs of rupees that. So I feel as somebody who was working private universities, I mean, I think India needs private universities. You're absolutely correct. We need private universities. We need more and more of that so that our students stop having that brain drain of spending millions of dollars going to US or UK or Canada or whatever, whichever country. I mean, there are a lot of countries that they are going, and give them a choice in the country itself. And then you are right that public institutions also should not be left off, or the operational capability of these institutions should not be eroded, and they should be made more and more accessible to a larger mass of our people. But I'll come back. We have a few interesting questions in the chat box. I'll like to take them.
Just one thing, Ankur.
Harsh,
This
Harshita,
is
you want to
Harshita. I just wanted to
go
say
ahead.
one thing, that when you talk about education as a private and public good, I was for a large part of my PhD, I was stuck there to kind of find out, because I work on private tutoring, and I've
Okay.
begun to realize that it's more like a positional good. So it's like a private good plus the aspect of social validation that you get. So it's more like a positional good. Probably if it's for your research, you might want to dwell a little more on this aspect, and that is where the aspect of equity and inclusion comes in, which sir was also talking about, as to how we can make sure that the private players are in line when the public education system is of a particular standard. So yeah, just a comment.
Thank you, Harshita. And Harshita, by the way, you're a PhD scholar at NIPA, right? Or you finished your PhD in the final year, right?
About to, probably this year end or maybe next year beginning. I will hopefully.
All the very best. All the very best. So thank you for that feedback. I'll take that note. I'll quickly go to the chat section. We have Sapna Goyal. Sapna, if you want to ask your question live, or do you want me to read it out? Let me know. So Sapna has asked, most of the watchdog bodies in the Indian education
You can
sector.
ask.
Yeah, go ahead. I was doing that. Most of the watchdog bodies in the Indian education sectors are government and are prone to corruption. What can be an alternate model? Mahesh, you want to take this?
No, I think, see, anything that you do, like I can also turn around and say most of the private universities that were formed were based out of corruption. So this argument doesn't, see, whenever we deal with, oh, there is corruption, so we should not get into it, then we don't do anything, because everything is prone for corruption, and the corruption can be anything, ethical, moral, financial, or anything like that, right? The simple thing is this: is there a need for a country of the size, scale, and demographics as India to not have affordable education where every student who wants to study would have an option to study? That's a simple question that we need to answer as a nation. And for me, the answer is very, very clear, that everyone who needs to study, wants to study, and has a hunger to study must have an option to study at a certain place. And how the nation funds it or feeds it is its own issue. We have enough money, it's just the priorities that have to be correct. It's like this. Let me turn this question around dramatically, right? Go and ask any middle class parent at this point in time of how much of their annual income or monthly income is invested in education for the child. You'll broadly get about 20 to 25%. It can be 15%, 20%, 25%, but that's the amount of money that a parent in India spends on their children's education. The same set of people, when they become policymakers, spend 4%. How does that happen? So when it is your child, you don't mind spending 20%. When it's someone's child, you want to spend only 4% because you think their priorities are different. You get the point. And that is what needs to be confronted. Okay, how is it that you deal with your annual budget when it concerns your family, and how is it different when you deal with it when you're a policymaker?
So Mahesh, my question was more about watch bodies. What I'm referring to is that in terms of people who are checking on institutions delivering education, the entire system right now is only in the government space, more or less, right? While and the way people are getting licenses to run universities or institutes, so that whole system itself has become very questionable, because there are no civil watch bodies other than the government who are keeping track of what's going on there.
Yeah, so I think transparency, freeing us from corruption is across the board, Sapna. That all I'm saying is that the fact that there is corruption or there's a possibility of corruption should not stop us from thinking that we'll clean up the corruption while still moving ahead in terms of policies, right? See, there needs to be a check. Like, for example, I'll turn this question again in a different way, right? If you're an investor worth 1,000 rupees in a stock market, in a share in a stock market, SEBI protects you, right? With all the corruption that is there, SEBI protects you. And SEBI also is a government body in a certain sense, right? You turn this around and ask a child who spent 10 lakh rupees in 4 years and doesn't get a degree. Who's there to protect them?
No one.
Right. And that's the challenge that I'm talking. See, both are government bodies. UGC is a government body, ACT is a government body, SEBI also is a government body. All three are autonomous bodies. It is just that in certain spaces, like it can be NMC earlier and now whatever it is, Medical Council of India, MCI and NMC now and whatever, right? The corruption is in the education ecosystem. The corruption is not there in a few other things. We need to make them clean, but it should not stop us from thinking of policies to protect, ring fence, and secure our children in that sense. And corruption is there. I can vouch for it, like the way the NAC ratings happen, the way the NRF rankings, especially in the current year, happened. I can see that something wrong has happened, but it doesn't stop me from thinking that still, okay, there is a problem here, but we still need to keep pushing this transparency envelope and this, this thing of ensuring that private institutions comply with certain guidelines and laws.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Sapna. And I think with regards to NIRF, I think I also read a couple of articles about the major issues that have happened there in terms of rankings. I'll go to another set of questions. I see Jitin Chavla. Jitin, you want to ask your question live? I think that's a better way of doing it.
Yeah, hi.
Hi,
Yeah.
Jitin.
So great, amazing work. In fact, when the IIPM story was breaking out, I did a couple of articles, of course, on careers. I was in touch with uh, one journalist at that time who was working with Careers 360, and everything unfolded. It was amazing. I mean, the way the entire thing was, I mean, God give you more and more strength. It is
Thanks so much.
great, amazing work done.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so right now also, like for any magazine, and long time back I worked in HT as a brand manager too. So advertisers would be after my boss at that time, Ashish Bagga, and he would get
Okay.
calls from the top shots.
He's a good friend of mine.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
We would get calls from the top shots, and I was a puny brand manager, but I would also get calls, and there would be people who would be pushing. Even ad should come on the first page, or you put up a flap, or do something so that I get the first position. So I'm sure education advertisers also, they are after your life, and somewhere they would try to push and pull. So how does one balance that, and what is the outlook, and how does it fan out to the entire team? Since there's a huge team, so how those policies are created and what is happening at the background, if you can share with all of us, I think it'll be helpful for us.
So at Careers na, Jitin, if you noticed the way we structured ourselves, we have a set of products where the students pay, right? And the college predictors, the counseling packs and all, the students are paying for it. The entire counseling and prediction that happens is based on the data that is publicly available on a website, right? And like, for example, there is an institution that was a big advertiser for me who came and said that, can you remove this cutoff data from your from our page, college page? And वो medical college था, उनका cutoff था 4.5 लाख पे last admission था उनका, right? And the institution said, can you remove this? We said no, because the structure of the format is such that my counselor accesses that information to say, okay, आपका 4 लाख rank है, इसमें मिल जाएगा, because 4.5 लाख तक last year गया था, right? We are strategically, chained ourselves to facts, which is my data cannot be compromised. The data on my college page, in terms of placements, in terms of fees, in terms of cutoffs, those things cannot be compromised, because based on that, the counseling is happening, based on which the college predictor is working, based on that, the counselor is talking to the student also, right? Once you secure your data, the data structures, and the same data, by the way, also goes, like, we are the only player in the world who supplies data to Google on the Google Knowledge Panel. We power the Google Knowledge Panel for about 40,000 colleges and 400 examinations in the country, right? And they pay us money for that. So, and there I have a liability clause. If my data is wrong, they can sue me and I'm liable for that, right? So I strategically chain myself in a format where my data integrity has to be correct. Otherwise, I lose the student revenue, I lose my Google revenue, right? Once that happens, everyone, even anyone who comes in, will have to give up one for the other. So assuming they want to satisfy an advertiser, they have to give up the student revenue or the Google revenue.
Absolutely.
So I've chained myself in that strategically, so that no one ever has even thinks, even opportunistically, to say that, listen, let me satisfy an advertiser by removing this, because if you remove that, Google data will not go there. So to that extent, that institution's cutoff data would not be with Google, and Google will question me, one. And two, my college predictor will not work for that institution.
Absolutely. Great.
So thank you, Jitin, and thank you, Mahesh, for that answer. Can I call in Neeraj and Vibha? Vibha, if you are there, you can go ahead, and then we'll go to Neeraj. I don't see Vibha around. Neeraj, you can go, and then probably we'll circle back to Vibha.
Yeah, great interacting with you, Maheshwar. So my question is, like you mentioned, the two things, affordability and good quality. Just a quick, because where you're coming from, just a quick pointers on what are the high impact areas, so which can actually make us do some impact, like or increase some quality. So what are those top areas where we can work on?
No, if you can just rephrase the question, and I didn't understand the question, Neeraj. I'm sorry.
So affordability and quality, like when you want to put a balance between these two, so obviously it's like a tug of war going on. So what, according to you, are some areas which can impact both, like affordability as well as quality, and where we can actually, as educationists, as people in the education field, where we can try and focus a little more so that the impact is faster and better?
No, I think, see, all of us must live within our means, right? See, Neeraj, India is a country where you have a chole bhatura at 5 rupees and 5,000 rupees. People know that idhar gaye to 5 rupees mein mil jayega, idhar gaye to 5,000 rupees mein milega. And we access all those things with equal, favor. Like if you can afford, you go to a 5-star and have the same chole bhatura. And if you can't access, a rickshaw wala will go and have a 5 rupee chole bhatura at a thela wala, right? Both these things need to coexist. I'm not for one moment saying that you must give up the premium private institutions who are charging 10 lakh rupees, 12 lakh rupees per annum and all, and creating that. But it should not also come at the cost of someone offering the same course at 5 rupees and creating better, people. If you were to start saying that, why are you offering at this, or why can't you increase the fee from here? That is when the challenge happens. That is when the challenge happens. Everyone has a right to survive, including the poorest child who is born in a poor family for no fault of his or hers, has a right to look for a bright future. When Careers was launched, Dr. Manmohan Singh and Dr. Kalam launched. I'll tell you a beautiful story. Dr. Manmohan Singh was launched and he was fighting a women's reservation bill in the parliament then. And he said, why don't you have Kapil Sibal launch it? Because he was the education HRD minister then. I said, no, sir, I don't want him to launch it, not because I have any problem with him, but I want a student who's believed in education and became the most powerful person in the nation because he believed in education. That is what education can do to you. Education is the truest democratic tool of empowerment. Your maidservant and my maidservant's children can aspire to be better than you and me and our children also by believing in education, right? That is a right that should not be snatched away because someone else comes in. My problem is not with private education institutions charging 12 lakh rupees. My problem is when they're advocating that we must increase the cost. Education cannot be given at a lower cost. That's when I get in, because they say, why do you subsidize? Why should we pay someone else's fees? Why should we have so much budget? Why should we, when the country cannot afford for something else, why can't we? No, those are wrong questions to be asked. You never asked a government why you should be writing off someone else's loans. You never asked the government why you should be spending on certain things which are not meant for a country of the scale, size, and demographic profile of a country in the nature of India. The thing is, public education must survive, while private education can take it to the next level. But the growth of private education should not come at the cost of public education. Now the second part of it, quality and affordability, you talked. Look at every single NIT or IIT or anything, they're self-sustaining. There is a grant that is coming from the government. That's a small amount of grant for the kind of research that they do, which actually benefits the nation. Like you look at, for example, Indian Institute of Space Science and Technology, IISST, right? उनका funding कितना है आप देख लीजिएगा, and look at what they've done for ISRO आप देख लीजिएगा. 90% of the students go and join ISRO, and they benefit in the nation, right? Now, if you were to look at IISST as a single entity and say, यार इसको 100 crore रुपए मुझे क्यों देना है as a funding grant, then you get into a problem, right? You have to look at it in a holistic perspective, then looking at it as a P&L for that institution at that level, and say, मेरा 100 crore का fee है, 200 crore का expenditure है, so we need to increase the fee twice, increase it twice over. That is when we as a nation start making a mistake. That's all I'm saying.
Got that. Thank you.
Sir,
Thank
but
you,
then
Neeraj.
can we have a stratified fee structure? Do you advocate for a stratified fee structure?
It is there actually in quite a few institutions. Like if you go to Shivnada University, it is need blind, right? And based on the income levels and the merit levels, now fee scales up. It is possible. The thing is this, is it possible for us to ensure that every kind of a student can come into a college based on the merit? If you're talking of a merit-based society, let's deal with merit only. Let's not talk of affordability, because affordability is also a reservation. If you increase the fee dramatically, it's a reservation for the rich, isn't it?
But then merit also does not exist in vacuum. When we say merit, it is also a function of various other factors and various other liabilities.
Absolutely. You know, my son getting 90% is not better than my driver's son getting 60%. My driver's son getting 60% is possibly better than my son getting 90% with all the affordability, right? So that's one part of it. But I'm just saying, when people talk of meritocracy, they forget the fact that when you increase the fee dramatically, like for example, I'll give you another example. You take medical education, right? Medical education may, this year the pass marks is 117 out of 720, 117 out of 720, which is 16.25%. Right? Now, why do you, so the doctor that is treating you is possibly got 16.25% in NEET. We never talk of that. Now, why do we need to lower the standard so much? Because we wanted to create enough pool to ensure that we still have a student who's paying the 1.5 crore fees also, which is what a private education institution would be charging for MBBS. Right? Pacific Institute karke Udaipur mein 35 lakhs per annum, 5 years, 1.75 crores fees. Right? So you need to create a larger pool to ensure that every seat in a private institution which is charging very high fee still has an option to get a student. So at 10 lakh rank also, you still get a seat in a country where there are only 60,000 or 80,000 medical seats. Right? So the thing is about affordability is that, you know, when you deal with high fees, which is unaffordable kind of a thing, it is a reservation for the rich. It is a reservation for those people who can pay 1.5 crore rupee fee. And that takes away 99% of the students who are based on merit. So stratified thing is compulsory. Like you go back to the TAPI judgment long back, you know, this is 20-25 years back when the case was filed. There was one beautiful conversation that happened in the Supreme Court, which said that can we have 50% seats for the people who can afford, and the balance 50% we give it free for those students who can't afford, but purely based on merit. Right? Karnataka follows that. 50% seats are for in private education institutions also are owned by the government, and they'll go through the government counseling where the fee is 50, 60, 70,000 rupees, and they do that very beautifully.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Mahesh, you want to ask something? Or
not me?
No, there is another Mahesh. Mahesh
Okay.
Putapaka. I just wanted to, I saw some signal from his side. So perfect. I think thank you so much for your Q&A. I think that has been fantastic. I have a couple of questions that I want to ask Mahesh as a student of higher education myself. And I mean, one of the things that you have always stood for, and in the last hour or so that we have been talking, about inclusion, and you have been talking about creating opportunities for our students in more and more public institutions itself. I mean, we had the new education policy that came in 2020, and more or less, I think most of the coverage of the NEP was on the positive side. I mean, a lot of the commentators gave it, really high acceptance in the community, higher education community in the country. What will be your take on the new education policy, and do you think it suffices your advocacy of diversity and inclusion? It talks more about liberal arts and interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary and setting up large universities in every district. That would be so. Just a quick understanding from your perspective of NEP, and what do you think was right and wrong, whatever. I mean, you want to comment?
In my
on
perspective, NAP, the current NAP by Dr. Kasturirangan is one of the best documents that was produced in the last 3 decades. Right? Because it talks of flexibility, it gives greater freedom to the student, it gives greater freedom to the institution, and it also advocates affordability and equity and all those things. It's just that those things don't come out in the media because they're not spoken to, because they're not handouts given for the private institutions in that sense, right? But NEP in its entirety is one of the best documents. India needed that shake up dramatically. So otherwise, now we are always doing with an incremental change in the policy making. NEP turned that on its head and reimagine the way education system should be. And thankfully, I was always I was always thinking that the regulators would not have the gall to actually take it with both the hands and deal with it, because NEP essentially is taking away a lot of powers from the regulators and giving it to the private players in terms of flexibility and all those things, right? But thankfully, I think the current establishment is actually working towards that. They've been really aggressive in pushing the NEP document and implementing the NEP document. So I don't want to get into the negatives because there are small things that's smaller. But as a larger piece, the best thing that could have happened to the Indian education system.
Yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
somebody unmuted himself.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead,
So
Mahesh.
one of the best documents, and the implementation also is very satisfactory. So I'm pretty happy with NAP.
Amazing. So good to know. And one of the things that is of mine, and I think these are the last few questions that I have for you, is the oncoming transformation in terms of AI and machine learning, and how, and I think we TOC, we retreat, I go back to that session that we had at Shulini University, 60 of us were there, and we did a session on AI and machine learning, and how that is going to transform the world that we are living in right now. And I think most of our education institutions are not prepared of what is happening. So how do you see, what are those, and there are a few TOCNs here that advocate, that something needs to be done very fast. I'm one of them in our educational pedagogy curriculum to prepare our kids. I have a daughter who goes to school, and I am a little anxious for her when she comes out in maybe 10 years time and she's ready for the job market, or start working, what kind of world she will be inheriting. So what is your take on AI, ML, and how do you prepare as a career counselor, wearing your career counselor hat? What is the advice you give to students? What kind of, this is the obvious question that everybody asks her, sir, what is the highest paying jobs? What do you think when I will graduate? अब मैं वही course कर लूंगा. अच्छा, मेरे को आप ये बताओ, AI का नाम सुना है. So AI, should I do an engineering program because AI is going to take over everything? How do you answer basic questions like these two questions to students who want to make career choices, career decisions, with keeping this aspect in mind of the technology innovation that is happening so fast?
So AI is here to stay. AI will transform definitely everything that we work on. Many of the things that we were working on earlier, the AI would be doing it in a jiffy. So there is no running away from that. We just need to. AI can only respond to the kind of questions that we ask, or the kind of creative thinking that we put forward to it, or the kind of thought process that we suggest it to be, right? So from that thing, the cognitive abilities of the student, the ability to ask the right question, the ability to judge the right way, and I think in a certain sense, education is supposed to be that, isn't it? It's empowering the student to ask the right question at the right time. So from that perspective, I think much of what earlier was liberal arts or arts would come in prominence in a certain sense, because they are groomed to be questioning in nature, asking stuff that other people don't explore. So for me, the merger of technology with liberal arts is what ultimately it'll pan out to be, hopefully. But AI is here to stay, and in any student who's studying anything, at some point in time, they need to start getting into how the creative abilities and how the questioning abilities that education system develops would be able to, only those 2-3 things can actually empower AI based solution from that perspective. So for me, moving forward, you need to deal with AI, and you need to, we as a society and as a school student also need to understand how we can use AI to solve our problems, then fight with AI and see whether there is anything else as an alternative.
Agreed. I think we have to learn to live with technology. I think somebody was telling me, same happened when the computers came into the picture, and there was a big in India, when computers were introduced in the banking sector, there was big hartals and everything that computers are going to take away job. But we all know the story. I mean, India became an IT hub, and we had companies like Infosys and HCL and Shiv Nadar. I mean, all these big players that came in, and the banking sectors also underwent privatization, and today is doing very well. Thank you so much. I mean, we had a fantastic conversation with you, Mahesh. We loved every second of it. I think I've enjoyed everything that you had, and I learned a lot. That's always a good
My
thing.
pleasure. My
I
pleasure.
was to hear you with us for last 90 minutes. It was a pleasure. I would like to say thank you for taking time out and being honest and sincere with your answers that we all know of you from what we have read about you and what we have seen you on social media. I mean, to have you with us in the community was amazing. I hope you enjoyed the conversation
Yeah,
with
thanks so much. It was
TOCNs.
wonderful. It was wonderful.
I
It
think
was wonderful.
so. Thank you so much on behalf of the Outreach Collective. We look forward to being in touch with you. I mean, we will be happy to collaborate with you in any which capacity as a community. If we can help in forwarding, taking forward your mission, because a lot of us align with what you are trying to do. And as you said in your initial remarks, when group of people come together, the accountability increases, and also the support that you get to your ideas is doubled in more than a single person. You are then 20 people together talking about a similar idea, and this community itself is a testament to that energy that comes when people with the right intentions come together and they try to move the needle a little bit forward, a little bit more. Thank you so much for all that you have done over the years for the education sector. I mean, starting with your role in Outlook and then going on to Career 360 and the battles that you had with the legal arena. Thank you for fighting those battles for all of us. And thank you for having a heart out for the, as you said rightly, the lowest man in the chain, as Mahatma Gandhi said. I mean, every action that you take should keep in mind the lowest of the lowest in the hierarchy of society. So thank you for living those ideals, and thank you for inspiring us. Many
pleasure.
gratitude, and we look forward to having you back
Thank
again at
Thanks
some
so
time
much.
soon.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye
Thanks
bye.
so much.
Bye bye. Bye bye,
Bye.
community. Thank you for joining in, everyone. We look forward to having you again for our next session. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye bye,
Thanks so much.
TOCNs.
Bye. Bye, guys. Bye. Bye.